So one of the first signings that the Pistons made was Tobias Harris. And I wanted to get kind of your reactions to the signing. Do you think this was a good value signing for the type of contract that they gave him over a 2-year period?
I think it's really hard to have a bad 2-year contract. And so do I think that Tobias Harris is worth, $30 million on the open market? Like, probably not. But I do think the Pistons had a glut of cap space, needed to use it on someone. And I think Tobias is a fairly good candidate. He really fits on the roster. Like, we talked about wing depth, right? He obviously adds to that. He's not like a primary ball handler, but as like a second side guy who can generate offense. He's averaged 16 points a game at least for like the last like 5 or so years. And so you expect to have like a nice scoring baseline coming from the wing position, which is something they didn't really have last year. And like it is only a 2-year deal, right? Like sure he's overpaid, but I don't think that like his contract is going to really, really like deleterious to the Pistons, like in the long term. Like it's really like, again, it's just really bad to have. It's really hard to have a bad 2-year deal, and he should still be a helpful player, right? I mean, he's been a fairly consistent, fairly durable player. This is something like James has pointed out a bunch, or James Edwards III at The Athletic has pointed out a bunch, that like a lot of Langdon's acquisitions like actually play and don't get injured, which is nice. And yeah, I just think he'll be useful. Yeah, I think I think the frustration people see is like, people saw obviously he struggled a lot in the playoffs over the years for the Sixers, and that gives a big like negative impression of him to people. But the Pistons don't need him to perform in the playoffs. They need to get to the playoffs. He should help them do that.
Yeah, baby steps, you guys, baby steps.
Yeah.
We'll get there, but I mean, I thought for the contract, I always said like between 15 to 25, I thought was kind of like the range that he could possibly get. I know I saw a lot of people on Twitter overreacting, saying, "Oh, like why did we go after a guy we already had?" Which, to your point, at 16 and 7, durable. Like I pulled up the numbers because it's off season and I have way too much time on my hands. He played 70 games last year. And Joe Harris and Monte Morris combined played 22. And that was a bulk of your cap space last year.
Man, Joe Harris was here. Remember that? Yeah. And like, not that, and like they use the bulk of their cap space on not even in Joe Harris and Monte Morris, like guys that you hope can play. Joe Harris in particular was just like so confusing to me because like I thought he looked pretty done the last I had seen him play. But like Tobias is not like, oh, I hope he can play. Tobias is like, oh, like he can start, right? Like we know we're going to be able to rely on this guy for production. And I think that's really valuable for a team that had a lot of uncertainty coming into or, going through last year.
Yeah. I mean, I like the signing. I don't think it's a signing where, I know how Pistons Twitter is. I know how they overreact to like every little thing, but I think it's a good signing. And you kind of need those bigger contracts if you want to attract some of those stars out there, like 26 million, and then you throw a 10 million and a 5 million there. Maybe you can, possibly trade for a max player down the road. You never really know.
Yeah, I do think that like a lot of it too is just like people feel like the opportunity cost of spending that money elsewhere is now gone. Pistons only have it's like 20 million in cap space right after the Beasley signing. It's like, oh well, we had 60 million in space, and all we have to show for it is like Tobias Harris, and it's like that I understand like why on its face that's kind of frustrating, but like on the other hand, like I don't know if some of the other names that people were talking about, like right, like Brandon Ingram, Zach LaVine. Like, I think again, like those are longer term commitments, and this Pistons team is still kind of rebuilding. And I don't know if you want to. I don't know if with a new head guy, with a new head coach, I don't know if you want to make a long term commitment to a Brandon Ingram or a Zach LaVine And that's like the best way to be moving forward with the team. And so I was like, yeah, just having a short deal like gives you flexibility this year and next, and and like again, Tobias can still play and be consistent and be productive and be healthy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the health part is actually like worth the contract because you last year you used the bulk of your cap space on guys that, like you said, Joe Harris was like on a really serious calf injury and it had like no lift
Yeah.
whatsoever. I mean, I might have more lift and I'm way out of shape and I haven't played basketball in probably 10 years. And then the Monte Morris thing was weird. Like he was healthy, then he wasn't healthy, then they wouldn't clear him, and then he was traded. And I was like, wow, like that, what a roller coaster. But
Yeah.
happy for him in Phoenix. Actually have a point guard now, so they might be able to do something come playoff time. You never know. But
Yeah, that was a really good signing by them. I like that signing for Phoenix.
yeah, same here, same here. I did want to shift over to Malik Beasley, and kind of the same question. Like, what were your thoughts on the signing, and were you surprised that the Pistons got him for under $10 million a year?
I was surprised the Pistons. So my thing was like after the Tim Hardaway Jr. trade, which we're like not doing it in order. I was surprised that the Pistons wanted another of this type of guy, right? Like a heavy catch and shoot guy, playing like small shooting guard or small forward, but not an amazing defender. Somebody who can be attacked defensively, but like a really useful offensive utility piece. They had been rumored to be in like the Buddy Hield sweepstakes. Obviously, I think the situation that Buddy chose is a little bit better than Detroit. So I can see why they wanted, and you can see why they want to put more spacing around Cade Cunningham and use that to figure out if he's going to be someone you build everything around for the next couple of years. Was I surprised he got like less than 10 million? Like, no, not really. Beasley's a very one-dimensional player. He was very helpful and useful for the Bucks last year, but he also he's had stretches during his career in which he goes cold shooting from three, and if he's not making threes, like there's not really a lot he's offering you, and so I understand why a one-dimensional piece and player like that would not be very heavily valued. The other thing I'll say is not a lot of teams had cap space with the new CBA, with the new second apron thing. His talents, I think, are more suited to a contender, right? As just like a guy who comes in and what he does and he's consistent with it. And we've seen him play that role for quite a few contending teams over the last couple of years. But so I think in him signing a very short, a 1-year deal that's very, very tradable, I think it's entirely possible that he's flipped at the deadline if he performs. And if he doesn't, then it was just a 1-year deal. He can go back on the market, and the Pistons don't have to force themselves to play him, right? It's not we handed this guy $15 million. We got to play him. It's no, he can, if he's not fulfilling his role, there are other directions the team has to go in. So yeah, I'm a fan, but I like the move. I like Beasley as a piece. I understand what he does. It just surprised me when I first saw the news.
I was kind of surprised because I saw the Hoops Hype report. Mm-hmm. It's the Pistons want to target Beasley, but they also want to go in the market for a trade to absorb cap space. And then 6 hours later, it's you get the Shams tweet. I'm oh, okay, so we're getting him. Cool. I like him offensively. To your point, he's an elite 3-point shooter. He's a sharpshooter. The one thing that is really weird about him, and I don't know if it's a consistency thing. You look at his free throw numbers, he's either 80% or 60%. There's no in between. It's the weirdest thing. I was just he just flips a coin 1 year. So okay, I'm gonna be an 80% 3-point shooter. I think he shot 70-ish last year with the Bucks. But to your point, I think you could flip it because it's only $6 million. It's a 1-year rental. If it works, cool. If it doesn't, it's not that big. And I think it's kind of telling too with Langdon and Blackstone of just these 1 to 2-year deals. Like they're not really committing long-term money on this roster, which I think is smart because you don't really know what you have yet.